So we are recording and live.
Hey, as I said that, I have to get my file. Hey, welcome everyone to a meeting of the Community Preservation Committee of the City of Newburyport. This evening is our meeting where we are deliberating on the applications that we have been presented with in February and have heard from the applicants in two separate meetings since then. First thing I'd like to do is have a roll call for the record. Okay. Chuck Griffin. Chuck, you're muted. I can see you though. There he is. All right, Chuck, you're still we still don't hear you, so work on that. I will just let the record show that Chuck is present and working on his equipment. Paul Healy.
Here.
Jane Healy.
Here.
Don Little.
Present.
Joe Morgan.
Here.
And Tom O'Brien is on his way, I believe. Okay. We will note when he arrives. Mark Rosen.
I am here.
Don Walters.
Here.
Okay, great. So calling the meeting to order. You have all received by email, two separate emails, actually, an original packet as well as a supplemental packet with communications, updated communications from some applicants with additional information, as well as another communication from the mayor's office indicating the mayor's office's thoughts on ways that the various applications could be financed. I would like to note that we are receiving and filing for this meeting all documents and items that were circulated to the committee and are part of our meeting packets. Okay. Second item on the agenda is the Museum of Old Newbury project bidding update. That would be part of the additional supplemental information that we got. And I believe it generally indicated that they were in the process of, they had ordered and paid for a inspection, following which, based on that inspection, they should receive a second bid from an outfit that is very experienced in historic restorations of building exteriors. Okay.
Excuse me, Mike.
Yes.
Does that mean that for purposes of tonight, when we're discussing that project, we don't really know what the cost is?
Yeah, at the moment, all we have is their the estimate
Right.
that came in with their application, and I believe it was 69,750.
Right.
So that's at the moment, that's the number that that we have to work with.
Okay.
Okay. Right. As I referenced, we have project updates within the packet. And anybody, while we are discussing the projects later, if anybody wishes to reference those, the information in any of those documents, that's all in front of us and is useful for informing our decisions tonight. Before we go on to the actual deliberations, I'd like to take a moment to try to do something from 30,000 feet here, and that's a couple of things that came to mind that make this cycle different from many of the cycles we've had in recent years, and the two things that come to mind. One is obvious. It's the large projects with bonding requests, and I don't think that's happened for about a decade. But before we get into that, we do have we have received pretty detailed thoughts, preferences, and priorities from the Office of the Mayor. That isn't something that we have routinely seen. Generally, it's been just individual letters for individual projects without a context of prioritization. I personally feel that this is welcome and helpful in terms of informing us of what another branch of the municipal government thoughts are on priorities, and I find that good information. I also just want to underscore that we are an independent body. We have our own ideas of what's important, what's currently in need, our own priorities, and we bring that to this table in order to reach consensus among us that may or may not follow the items that are informing us from the mayor's office. So I hope that you all have seen it, read it, and take it with the same attitude that I have, that it's good information to have and to apply as we go about our specific duties and discretions and processes here. Okay. That second big thing that makes this fun and interesting is the concept of a significant bonding request and how that works into differently from just how many dollars go out the door in a given year and what we might have left and whether we can afford to do everything that's been asked for. It causes us to consider very hard how much comfort we have in committing a certain percentage of what our expected revenue stream is on an annual basis for a 15-year stretch, taking it off the table for 15 years. That's going to possibly, that comfort level is going to possibly be very different for each of us. But I think that's an important item to weigh in order to get to yes collectively here today. And I think it's something that each of us should feel free to express their discomfort or comfort on the possibility that 35 to 45% of revenues will be dedicated to certain projects, to the exclusion of anything that we might hope that comes up in the future by way of opportunities or needs that might not be able to be fully satisfied if that amount of money is put aside. Now, the reverse of that, or the other side of that argument, is large projects in need with the capacity to get done in the near term, if they are funded by a bond now, is a great benefit. It's a significant project that hits the street and it's done for people to enjoy, as opposed to several other smaller projects that can be done in pieces that may not affect as many members of the community positively as the large significant project. So that there are benefits and good factors to weigh in taking the big step now, because the opportunities are there to meet these needs that have been tried to be met for the last several decades. So you saw in looking at Caitlin's staff report, basically in round numbers, what the net result could be for funding significant portions of two of these projects tonight with a bond, and what it would mean in terms of available funds in years to come over the next 15 years. And the piece of information that I don't believe we have yet, but just as a matter of fact, the current bonding, that 186,000 that are on, there's three bonds outstanding, three projects. That does not run the full 15 years. I believe it will retire sometime during that 15-year term, probably in less than 7 years. And in that event, obviously, we have more uncommitted, unspent funds available at the back end of this 15-year term than we would if we had to go with that extra 186 stretched all the way out to 15 years with the new debt service that we're considering tonight. Okay. That being said, I don't know whether it's this is unlike what we've done in the past, but do people feel that there's some benefit in talking about the comfort level we have in bonding up to, spending up to $500,000 per cycle for 15 years on the two largest projects that are requesting bonding, and that would be the Market Landing Park and Bartlett. That we talk about that generally before we get started on the nuts and bolts. What do you guys feel about that?
I think it's definitely worth talking about. I remember being on this commission way back when we had those other two large bonding issues in the same year. And we were all concerned about what that would do to the following year's allocations. And but we passed both bonds and we did survive it. It worked out okay. I think in some of these spreadsheets that were put out they talk about the future years and how much we would have to spend. To me, those numbers could be a bit more conservative in that they're assuming that the state match stays pretty high. And I don't know if that's really going to happen. So we should be prepared that it might be smaller than what they're predicting.
Mhm.
And you know, they're two projects that you know, if you're going to do them, you got to do them. You know, I have my own qualms about some of them, but I think we really want to know, you know, to get a good feel that everybody is good with lowering the amount of money available in the coming years.
Mark Rosen, your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. So if I'm reading this right, if we do what the mayor is recommending, we go forward with both bonds, none of the money that we're going to allocate this year would be used for the first bond payments. That's a comment and a question. Am I correct?
That
Okay.
is correct. Yes.
Okay, so if that's the case, and if we take all the other recommendations, including 525,000 for Lower Atkinson, reducing JAPA to 0, and giving 216,000, that gives us 740,000 to allocate this year, which pretty much covers everything else. I'm doing this via the spreadsheet that we were given. So if we go 216 plus 525, that's 741, and just eyeballing it, looks like, you know, we pretty much have everything else covered.
So as a matter of fact, I think if we did it that way, we'd end up with about 92,000 to the good.
Right. Okay. So we can do what the mayor is requesting and make everybody else happy. And then from now on, we're going to be spending for just those two bonds about $500,000 a year for 15 years.
Right.
And so if that's the case, we'll still have, if the average is like it has been for the past couple of years, about 1.2 to 1.3 million, we'll still be able to disperse about 700 and something thousand, again, in rough numbers, ongoing. And then we have we're seeing the end of another bond. We don't know how much it is, but so we'd still be in pretty good shape. Because typically we don't see requests that high. And these are very important projects for the city. So that's my discussion. And I just wanted to clarify that I was reading it right as well.
Okay.
Good.
Don Walters.
Sure, thank you. A couple of comments. I think I'm closer to Paul with respect to my views in this. I do feel that increasing the amount of long-term debt and in turn decreasing our flexibility or optionality in future years would be okay. My concern that I have is we're going from approximately $186,000 in commitments to $700,000. And I appreciate the number that's been put together by the administration of 1.3 million. But again, as Paul said, who knows? There could be some years, and albeit perhaps that doesn't occur that often, that we don't have the state match for 32.3%. And so the amount of money that we have for other potential projects in the future years, not that any of us have a crystal ball, is greatly diminished. So while I am okay with increasing our long-term debt obligation from $186,000 to something else, at this particular point, folks, I'm not comfortable with going from $186,000 to $700,000, which is approximately 70% if you strike out the of our available funds, if you strike out the state match. I would also say, and this is not necessarily the purview of the CPC, but if this was such a critical drive for the city, there's nothing to prevent the city, just as they did for the schools and the senior community center, for requesting a Proposition 2.5 override, and then having the town, the residents of this town, city, vote for it. So that avenue is always available. Not that this is an end around, because we've been voted by the residents to form the CPC. And of course, any of our decisions are ratified by the city council, but nonetheless, we're putting $500,000 extra debt without necessarily the residents of the city voting for it. Clearly, that's a secondary reason. My primary reason for objecting to the extra $500,000, I just think it takes away some of our optionality, and none of us know what may be becoming a worthy project down the line. So again, I'm okay for increasing it. I'm just not okay with increasing it that amount. Thank you.
Don Little?
Thanks. Mr. Doucette, you earlier used the word comfort level, or I guess I would just like to comment that I am uncomfortable with this. Doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to vote one way or the other. I'm still thinking. But yeah, 15 years is the more important one to me. I know it's a lot of money per year, but it's also for so many years. So just giving feedback at this point that I'm uncomfortable, I guess, what word I'd use.
Any other comments on this particular issue? Joe Morgan.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to just push it in the other direction, just to give balance to the conversation here. And I will bring it up, I guess, when we're going to talk about each of these projects individually. But there's one particular project that I am in disagreement with in terms of the reasons for lowering the request, and that is the Market Landing Park expansion. There, I would really like to push back and say, I really think we should fund it at the original 4.8 million level. I don't see delaying the completion of that project just because there's some perception that we are taxing the CPC funds inordinately here. I think this is a project that is paramount to complete. It's something that we've had our eyes on for a long time. Andy Port in his application has given excellent reasons, excellent justification for completing this project on time and on budget, and saving the citizens of Newburyport the additional cost and nuisance of phasing it and extending it. I mean, not to mention just the aesthetic and the psychological impacts it's going to have by not completing that entire package, with of course, with the exception of the visitor center. So I'm actually going to be advocating that we go back to the $4.8 million original request for that project. And therefore, what I'm saying is, if we are confident that these projects are important, this is I'm speaking specifically about the Mall and about the Market Landing Park. If we feel comfortable and confident that these are projects that have been in the works for a long time, that they are of the utmost importance to the city of Newburyport, then I say, by all means, this is the time to fund them, and to fund them completely, and in order to display the confidence that we have of the rightness and the correctness of completing these projects, because they've been around for a long time. So that's my comment. Thank you.
I have a question. Could somebody remind me, maybe Joe, you could help, the adjustment downward from 4.8 to 3 came from whom? Is that and based on what? Was it based on carving out a phase or a big chunk of the project?
Andy Port
Andy?
wants to respond to that.
Okay, Andy.
Sure. Thank you, Mike. And thank you, Joe, for your comments and your support. Yeah, I give full deference to the CPC and the council and the mayor as to where funding comes from and then how much. I agree with the arguments Joe has laid out. We recognize, I think that I had submitted that adjustment because originally I'd put that placeholder in there, recognizing the timing of the CPC applications. We needed to summarize the cost of the project. We were still assessing the feasibility of doing it all at once. In this case, the primary park spaces versus parking is part of it. That's the area where there's some question here. We might sort of postpone that and keep some gravel parking lots. It's not preferable from an efficiency point of view for the various reasons I had outlined in a memo to the CPC. But that being the case, I think we were trying to recognize that it could be difficult for the CPC, for the council, for the city to decide to commit that amount of money over a 15-year period, and certainly want to see the equal support for the Bartlett Mall project. So I didn't want to obviously have any impact on that project, but I also want to recognize that there are other projects this year and will be in future years, and without knowing exactly what those will be, recognizing that 1.8 million more would be an additional reduction in what you have available in future years. So again, we defer to you, but again, it was a placeholder number originally, what would be needed to complete the project, other than other sources that are currently available or that we are applying for this summer, the state's parks grant. And then that was adjusted accordingly as we were talking about the burden, if you will, that would place on CPC in future years, recognizing as Joe has laid out that, and as you had laid out, Chair, that there's a balancing act between having immediate improvements and maybe paying them off over time versus, phasing things and so forth.
Thanks, Andy. Jane Healy?
Yeah, I've given this a lot of thought over the last several weeks. And this comment doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not uncomfortable with dedicating that amount of funding for the next 15 years. But absent a 2.5% proposition override, a proposition 2.5% override, we're going to see these projects over the next several years. And I can tell you from history, it's going to be $250,000 a pop for both of them, probably. I'm just guessing. So there's $500,000, and we'll just see them, apply and apply and apply. And with prices going up, I can see the overall cost rising as well. And so that is going into my deliberation.
Thanks, Jane. Paul Healy, you mentioned when you made your comment about how we were both around when so many years ago when we did that 1 year when there was a historic preservation over $1 million and about 1.3 for right-of-way acquisition on the rail trail, plus a significant chunk of the common pasture.
Yeah.
And none of that, all of that was immediate. It was either opportunity or immediate need, with pieces of City Hall falling on people's heads.
Yeah.
So it was a hard decision to make to do, and I think the bond was, it was under 2.5 million, but at the time that was a significant chunk, and we had to tighten our belts for a couple years, but I don't believe that we lost any significant opportunity or lost any significant project that we because we were servicing that debt. So it's an example of not knowing what was going to come, but we at least have that that record now that we got through it and retired those bonds. So that's just an example, and it gives me a little more comfort that if you feel like you're getting too much of a mortgage on the house you want to buy, that I got to enjoy the house, so.
Yeah. Right.
Mark
Yeah, no,
Rosen.
I agree. And, I think the big difference was that some of the years following, it forced us to look more closely at the projects, and we had to say no to some.
Mhm.
But even that was okay, because everybody in the city knew that we just didn't have all the money, and it wasn't against any particular project. So we did survive it unscathed.
Well, a couple other things happened where we said no to a project. We often saw it a year or two later in a different docket.
Yeah.
We also would fund less than the amount that was asked, and lo and behold, they'd come up with the difference from
Yeah.
other sources.
Yeah.
So those things do find their way into the mix when your budget gets a little bit tighter. So,
Yeah.
sorry,
Okay.
Mark Rosen.
Yeah, that's fine. So just, to that point, you just making about reducing a request, can we increase a request, i.e. the go from 3 million to 4.8 million because we're recommending that? Can we do that? Or doesn't it have to come from the requestor?
I just think if you feel justified that they're going to be having to spend that money at some point, because we did see the numbers on the original application at the 4.8, even though it was a placeholder, as Andy said. I don't, as long as you're not just throwing money in the wind, there is some basis for it. I think you could certainly increase.
Well, is Andy wanting to request to increase the request back to 4.8? Question?
Well, Andy, I'll let you answer that, and then I'll say something.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, I certainly, to be clear, I certainly would not want to impact any funding you would give to the Bartlett Mall project, which I think is equally important to the city at this time. That being said, I certainly would also have no objection if you want to increase the amount for Market Landing Park, for all the reasons I had outlined previously about the inefficiencies or cost overruns that can happen from phasing, the delays to the public benefit that's seen by the rest of the city. Has waited so long for resolution of central waterfront issues, and the temporary disturbance to the downtown. And repeating that several times to me, it's preferable to avoid that. So that being the case, I certainly would not object to that. An increase in that funding, of course. If the CPC, again, as a matter of policy, it's up to the CPC to recommend and the council to decide where that priority is, both for
So Andy, in fact, the number should be 4.8 million on our chart. I understand, I don't think I think it's incorrect process to request 3 million and say, well, if you want to give me 4.8, ask for what you want, and the committee will decide whether or not it's the right or the wrong thing to do for us. So I'd rather see the 4.8 million on there if that's indeed what you need and what you want. And then we need to know how much more of a bonding payment, we need to look at.
Sure. No, you make a valid point. And to be clear, as project manager of that project, I definitely would request, and if you're able to support that level of funding, to do so for all the reasons I mentioned. Obviously, the CPC would be noted along with the city council and the other funding sources. It would definitely be preferable for all the reasons I outlined. I think, for the general public and the reasons I outlined, to have that done at once. So definitely that would be the need for the project if you'd like to see the whole thing done at once, based on Sasaki's cost estimate, rather than having just the park areas at best, not the parking, and maybe some fringe areas that are in an awkward transition as best as we can do.
Do we have any number on the bond payment if it was back up to 4.8 million? And by the way, that still would not come in to this year's allocation, right?
Correct.
That's correct. Yeah, as far as the bond payments, that would be delayed a year essentially.
Right.
Yeah, and as far as the amount, I mean, I don't know if Caitlin's discussed the sort of general threshold with Ethan Manning, who I don't think is with us tonight, but you can anticipate it's a little less than the doubling the amount that, you know, we
Right.
are talking about. So, you know, it's less than that a little bit, but as the refined.
Well, to go
number,
from 3 to 5 is about 1.75, so something like that. So it'd be close to
Yeah.
a $500,000 is what you're saying.
Yeah, I was sort of just under that, I guess, in some way, but I don't know the exact number. I defer to Ethan, who talks about these bonds frequently with the banks.
Yeah, okay.
One of the charts that we were provided by Ethan has a box in it that has ballparks for increasing in I think $100,000 amounts, what the debt service is. And it's someplace in the packet.
Mike?
yeah.
It's under the copy of CPA future funding capacity proposed borrowing. Spreadsheet is FY23 debt service estimates for the actual sheet. If I just changed it from 3 million to 4.8 million, just to see what Mark's figure would be, and it increases the annual debt service to 431,000 and some change for the market landing, which would bring, if the entire, if we chose to bond Bartlett Mall and market landing at 4.8 million, the total debt service would be 663,000 a year.
Right.
So it
lot of money.
adds about 163,000 a year to the debt
Yeah.
service, the
Yeah.
new debt service. Yeah.
It's a lot of money.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mike,
Now we're really talking about comfort.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
Paul?
yeah, I thought at some point during the past month, I read something, maybe it was just hopeful thinking that part of the reason that the request dropped from 4.8 to 3 was that there was a good indication that the city, the mayor and the city council would seek their own bond for the rest of the money, the rest of the project, which made, I thought that was really good. But now I'm getting the feeling that that's not the case. We're just going to cut part of the project. And I don't have a good idea yet what part of the project is being cut, what's going to be left over. What's the whole project now? And, I'm just kind of uncomfortable with all of that.
Okay. Joe, Morgan, your hand is up.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I just wanted to emphasize this isn't just the money, just with the dollar sign here in front of it. We're talking about value for money too. We need to understand what the priorities are. And like I said before, are we confident that these projects are really priority projects? And we can never predict the future. We don't know what future project may exceed in importance and scale something like a market landing. But I think we have to move ahead understanding that the value that these projects have had for us over the in the spirit of the community, what these projects represent, and to what degree we're willing to go and fund them with with the limited funds that we have, but knowing that value for money represents being able to fund these projects now when we have the resources, because those resources are going to become more costly. We know this year that lending rates are going to go up. I think we want to secure funding for these projects rather than delaying them. And I think it's very important to think that way. I've done the back of the envelope calculations for the $500,000 that's being requested for the playground safety improvements at Lower Atkinson. And it seems in either scenario, whether you want to take that money and put it into the bond, we'd still be below our maximum bond capacity as provided by the city of 8.5 million. Or we also, I think, have the option of making an out and out grant out of the remainder of our monies this year. So we would have the option. That's also, I think, very positive. It still gives us flexibility this year for how we want to fund that portion of the reduced scope Lower Atkinson Common Improvement Project, which I believe is a fair compromise in order to make the other two things that are really important, these other two park projects, happen. So that's the way I feel about it. Thank you.
Jane Healy.
Just to piggyback on what Joe just said, yeah, that's another thing that I've been thinking about is bonding Lower Atkinson versus paying, just recommending the 550 or whatever it is out of this year's allocation. So if we, the estimated annual debt service, if we bonded Lower Atkinson, would be about $50,000 a year. So do we pay that $50,000 a year and have that $500,000 to maybe keep and roll over for the next few years? And, in case we do get a larger project, or do we just go ahead and recommend, if we decide to recommend the full amount this year and not have that $50,000 burden going forward?
Okay, there's also, if you're talking, cash on the barrelhead to fund the project versus bonding it, there's the cost involved in the bond is what it's not just the soft cost, it's the interest, the carrying charge.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So okay, have we exhausted everybody's feelings on borrowing money? Okay. It seems to me that as Mark pointed out at the front end, if you just took the big picture, the easy picture, which is go for the bonds in the reduced amounts, that would be the three.
Mike, I think you're muted.
He's gone. Oh, no, he's
No,
back.
I disappeared. I'm out there in space someplace. Anyway, if we were to say, okay, go with the basically the 5.5 bond, and then currently fund everything else that's asked for, which would include the 216 in the Bartlett for the design. Then at the end of the evening, we've got $92,000 to put in the bank. So, that could be a way that we end up. I think in order to figure out if that's where we're going to end up, I hear from what everybody's saying that there's pretty much agreement that the two bonded projects are significant, are important, and we're going to do something with them. So what I'd like to do is start our deliberations with the topic we just kicked around a bit, which is see what consensus we can get on those two projects and what we're willing to do with them tonight, and then circle back to the balance of the cash that's in the till right now to distribute it this cycle. Does that work?
Makes sense.
Okay.
I wonder if we'd want to start with a straw vote as to who would be willing to allocate more than 3 million to the Waterfront Park.
Well, let's go to Waterfront Park. I mean, that
Yeah,
I
that's
think
the
has
big
got-
one.
That's the big one. That's got everybody's attention for good reason. And Andy's sitting down there on the edge of his seat. Okay, Andy? Here we go. So let's talk about what else would people like to contribute as terms of their thoughts on Market Landing and what tonight you would like to do with it, where you'd like that to end up tonight. Mark Rosen.
Well, I have a couple of questions for, I guess, Andy, because what I want to know is if we go ahead with the 3 million bond, what's the ramification? If we, to the timing, to the project getting done, and does it add, I'd like to know the ramification of passing it just the way it is.
Sure.
Can
Caitlin, if you don't mind,
I'm
I'm just
sorry.
gonna
Andy, can I interrupt you? This is
go right
Jane.
ahead.
And I know Andy's sitting here, and Andy, this is not personal.
Not
we're
an issue. Go right ahead.
we're asking a lot of questions of you, but we might not necessarily be able to, or give the opportunity to ask these same typical, similar questions to other applicants, which is making me a little uncomfortable. We covered this topic in our last meeting, Mark. I think you weren't able to be there. And so I just, if everyone else is fine, I will happily listen to what Andy has to say, but I'm a little concerned that we're giving one applicant more time than.
Can I respond to that concern?
Sure.
Where the context for the question requires that we're passing everybody else's request. So therefore, it's not, in my humble opinion, unfair to any of the other requesters. So we're only, right. And the 3 million is there at the behest of the requester, which is an unusual move on a requester in the first place to lower it out of concern for other requesters. And there is no impact on this year's requesters. So I hear what you're saying, but I don't think it's unfair or improper to ask Andy that question.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of precedents.
Yeah.
Could I respond to the concern and not the question, if that's all right?
Sure.
Just if it provides any reassurance to, I think I'm actually just reiterating something that was in the documentation I had submitted more recently. So it wouldn't necessarily be new information for the committee, if that's helpful.
Okay, go ahead, Andy.
And if you don't mind, I'm just gonna, Caitlin, I'd like to just grab screen to share something. Just because I think it'll help the committee to visualize a little, and again, I'll keep this very brief. This is just a visual of the Market Landing Park project. It's sort of faded out in the background a bit, just so I could provide some labels. This is the graphic that I used just to illustrate the, when I was talking with Sasaki about this project, we knew that funding for the project might be something that needed to be phased, and not being sure about where that was going to go. I had worked with them sometime last year, I think, to start looking at portions of the project. And so we broke it down into some chunks, basically, by geographic area, if you will. Most notable, I think, the east and west wings and the shared use path. And that's sort of the primary space we're trying to create here. But as you know, there's been litigation and debate and so forth of ways to the waterfront over the years. So we're also trying to complete finally Ferry Wharf Way, that pedestrian connection, and a new Central Wharf Way, which is actually, if you can see my little cursor here, being relocated from here over to here, and this will become Upper and Lower Railroad Ave is what we've talked about with the trust. That's just background, but to let you know what the reason I explain all that is because the intent here was to do park spaces as first priority. So that would be the $3 million would allow us, we think, based on the estimates from Sasaki, to proceed with this portion of the west wing, the east wing, Ferry Wharf Way, and then a strip between the west wing here leading up to Merrimack Street, so we could provide that full pedestrian way to Merrimack Street, but essentially deferring work on the parking lots to a later date. And we know that the parking lots have had some deference for a while. But obviously, the visitor center would not be done as part of this. We're hopeful we'll be able to qualify for some other outside funds for that project in a different capacity. So this would basically be priority, would be given towards the park space. We would back into the parking lots and potentially some of the landscaping around that, depending on where those numbers finally come out. But the full amount of funding would provide for the parking areas as well. So we would no longer essentially have those awkward transition areas or gravel parking lots. We would have a proper parking lot with landscaping around it. So that's a quick summary, hopefully, of the breakdown. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to elaborate.
Where does the visitor center fit into this? Is that part of the 1.8 million or part of the 3 million?
So that's part of the 3 million.
Okay.
Yeah, that's part of the 3 million, and it's just the corner here for this pedestrian way. So the circular area that's really capturing the building, which has actually been adjusted, its footprint on this drawing, over here a little bit to the west. That building and the little plaza area or landscaping around it, the seating and so forth, that would be deferred to a later date. We'd obviously continue to pursue funding for different aspects of that area, but we would certainly not be pursuing the building itself as part of this.
Andy, I'm a little confused on that answer. Are there going to be bathrooms as part of the $3 million?
No, that's a great question. So again, the current bathroom facility is basically where this new pedestrian way is going. So we would either temporarily relocate that, work with temporary porta potties or whatnot for a season, depending on what the best option was at the time, or if we're lucky and we're able to secure funding for the visitor restroom facility as well and align it here. Given that Sasaki will have full design plans for us for the entire layout that you see here. If that is the case, then we would do the visitor center facility simultaneously. But in that transitional situation, we would basically have either the trailer relocated and temporarily reused there to the west, or where the pop-up park
And
is.
that's seasonal only, those bathrooms.
That is correct. We are designing the new facility to be able to be used either in full or just one or two restrooms within the facility in the future, but the current facility is just a seasonal and probably would remain that at least during the construction
And the
phase.
planned one would be year round for bathrooms.
We're planning to have the facility be able to be year round. Yes, we would decide the operational side of the city, DPS maintenance, would be able to drain the pipes and whatnot to set up a zone essentially. To winterize, some of the restrooms that may not be used and reduce it to maybe 2 restrooms as opposed to 8 or.
Well, that's a pretty controversial subject, those restrooms.
Understood. Yeah. And again, that is not proposed as part of the CPC funding request. That would be, again, our hope is that will come from some other outside funding sources in addition to city funding, but we are not proposing that as part of this project to the CPC.
Yeah, but the 4.8 would include the visitor center and the restrooms.
Oh, I see what you're saying. No, the visitor center
No?
is still not part of that picture.
Oh,
Oh, well, yeah.
Now, who decided that should be the last priority? I don't mean, I'm not looking for names here. I'm just saying, maybe this isn't appropriate for this conversation, but to me, the visitor center with year-round bathrooms should come before something else.
Well, if I could, I want to speak for the other departments that would have to be involved, the mayor's office and so forth, in making decisions down the road as we go forward. But I presume we're going to provide, adequate coverage for those restrooms during the period of time in which there's a, moving of the trailer that's there today. I presume we would be able to do something to provide, on season for that. I just don't know what the detail of that would be.
Yeah, but not year-round.
Correct, but again, we don't have.
The point I'm trying to make is we need year-round restrooms at that location for the
I
public.
think, Mark, I think that's irrelevant to our discussion.
You're right. Michael, I totally agree. I thought it might be. And Sorry, thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Andy. Boy, the screen jumps around on me. Hold on a minute. Okay. You guys keep shrinking and going away.
Mike?
Yeah.
Caitlin, we don't
well,
need to see your screen.
Excuse?
I got two screens now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Caitlin is sharing her screen, which shows the same thing our screen shows. So there we go.
Ah,
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, here we go. Well,
Mike?
I'd like to, yes, Paul.
Yeah, so what I understand is that 1.6 million for the visitor center is not part of this at all.
Right.
So the
And I'm not
1.8
so sure
million,
it should be. Yeah.
well, yeah, it should be, but
No, I'm not so sure that it should be.
yeah,
is what
no, I'm saying that's, so the difference between the 4.8 million and the 3 million, well, excuse me, what we're giving up is the paving and spiffing up the parking lots.
Right.
So, yeah, and if that's the case, I'd certainly be opting for the 3 million solution
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah, just throw my 2 cents in and continue the discussion on market landing. As I think it sounds like a reasonable way to proceed, especially in light of the fact that we're dealing with the priority is creating the expanded park. That's what we're all about. The parking lot is something that does a lot more than just support the park, and therefore would be appropriate to attract other city funds
Right.
or funding sources that the city can track down, whether it's state or otherwise. So for my comfort level, I'm thinking that 3 million is a very significant investment to get that park in place and keep up the momentum. The existing parking areas are likely going to be used significantly for laydowns and construction equipment and everything else while the parks are being done anyway. So in that period of time, hopefully some other bucks come in the door. So that's my 2 cents. So anybody else with thoughts on market landing before we move to the next? Okay. Then I think what I'd like to do is and again, I'm just flying by the seat of my pants procedurally here in terms of how to bite off pieces and move on. What do people think about having a motion to recommend bonding for this project in the amount of $3 million, and then put that aside and move on, knowing that we have made that decision,
Yeah, that
or
sounds
not,
good.
depending upon how the vote comes out.
Right.
Can we vote on two requests at the same time? The two bonded requests at the same time?
Well,
Mike, can I provide a clarification on the market landing park? I think it's germane.
okay, go ahead.
Yeah, just want to be clear, and this is not to affect your vote. Just want to make sure that everybody has the same understanding. The parking areas does include some landscaping, keep in mind, both in the parking areas, but also at the edge of the parking, that will help to define and create the park space. I'm conveying this as, Sasaki as designers would be conveying the same message when you think about a park space. So keep in mind, I don't know specifically yet as to where that delineation will happen, but keep in mind that that may impact the level of screening or buffering or the appearance of that open space, depending on how much ground we can cover with the budget there. So again, just keep in mind that parking isn't just the, gravel being changed to asphalt and drainage systems. it actually includes some landscaping that may help to define the edge of the park. So just keep, I just don't want you to have misunderstood expectations based on the budget, the numbers and so forth. Our intention is to do as best as possible, working with Sasaki with the budget to work within $3 million if that's where you are. I just want to make that clear so you're not confused later on thinking that was going to provide, perfect edge to the land park and so forth.
Okay. Got
Okay,
it.
thank you. Thank you. Don Walters?
Yes, I just a comment with respect to voting both at once. I would like to vote for them sequentially for the primary reason is what I started off this meeting with saying about my an issue that I have with the amount. So it seems to me that if you obviously the majority rules here, but I think it's better to vote on each of these separately because at least in my case, if there's one of them I'm for and the other one as worthy as it is, I just feel we're putting too much debt on and sacrificing unforeseen, unknown, potentially beneficial projects down the road. So long story short, I'd vote for doing each one of them as you first suggested, Mike.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Okay. Well, then I'm open to hear a motion on Market Landing.
I'm happy
I'll,
to make that motion, Mike, to recommend in the amount of $3 million in the form of long-term 15-year debt service for Market Landing. Any other words we need to tweak to make it right, Mike?
Well, that sounds essentially correct, as long as we've got a term in there. That's the most important, the 15-year term. Is there a second?
I second it, Mark Rosen.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, then we'll do a roll call vote on the motion to recommend a 15-year bond in the amount of $3 million for Market Landing Park project. Chuck Griffin. Chuck, are you there?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
Chuck is showing us a sign that says yes. Okay. Paul Healy,
Yes,
Jane Healy,
Yes.
Don Little,
Yes,
Joe Morgan,
No,
and I believe Tom O'Brien is not here. Okay, Mark Rosen,
Yes.
Don Walters,
Yes.
the chair votes yes. Okay, so we'll put that decision aside and move on to the Bartlett Mall improvements with the request that is either a bond at 2.790 or a bond at 2.574 with 216,000 being funded currently for design and bid plans. So I will hear a motion from anyone on that.
Well, question, please.
Yes.
You're saying either or, doesn't it have to be one or the other on the motion?
yeah, the motion would be
we could-
one or the other.
One or
Right,
the
right,
other.
okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Pick an option and let's
I
see
would
what-
like
let's see what
to,
happens.
I'd like to move that we approve a $2.574 million 15-year bond and the $216,000 to be allocated for this year's round.
Okay.
For the Bartlett Mill.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Joe Morgan?
yes, I still have a question regarding those numbers. I understand the 216, it would be pulled out of the original, the number here, 2,790,000. That's in order to complete the engineering studies and the documents. I understand that. Just a note of something we have to understand is that the scope of the work under option 1 did not include the granite curbs and the associated foundation. I think what we have to do is make sure that option 2, this is the number for option 2. If we use the $2,790,000, that will cover the foundation and the curb, as long as there's the additional $216,000 that is separately appropriated for the engineering study. Okay, so the latest documentation that came from the Park Service shows the 2 options, and I think that option 2 should be specified in this particular case.
I thought that
That doesn't,
they requested flexibility in determining which option their engineers decided was the way to go.
Then in that case, I think that argues for the higher number.
well, it doesn't,
I think we have to
Wait, Mark.
maintain the larger number in order to accommodate the option number 2. That's where they would realize the $400,000 of savings, and it's that savings on option 2 that will pay for the foundation and the granite curb. In addition to providing the $216,000 early grant for the engineering study. So that 400 plus the 200,000 effectively covers the $600,000 for the foundation and the curb.
So I believe it is your comment essentially that the bond amount should remain at the 2.79
That's correct.
and plus the 216
That's
now.
right. That's correct.
That's your comment. Okay.
That's right.
Mark Rosen.
well, number one, that doesn't jive with, if you just simply read the letter from the mayor, why would he have recommended that we back out the 216,000 if it was going to affect the project?
Good question.
So either he wasn't informed properly, or, I don't know where the information is coming from, but all I know is that the total request is 2.790. And in essence, that's what we'd be approving, including the 216 immediately available. We can't go higher than the 2.79 by 216,000 because that's not the request.
Hi, Chair Dissett. This is Caitlin. We do have Kim Turner here on the line from the mayor's office, if she would want to clarify.
Okay, Kim, can you hold on a minute? I want to hear from Jane Healy.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, I should just let Kim speak because I'm looking at her letter, but it mentions that they believe that the difference, the delta, can be funded through fundraising efforts and alternate funding sources such as the Moral Foundation. But Kim, please speak to that.
Yes, Kim, go ahead and answer.
Thank you. Jane sort of already specified. So we're comfortable keeping the request at the same amount, with just the caveat that we'd like the flexibility to work with the engineering team to determine which of the 2 options makes the most sense. And we are confident that we can fundraise or use alternate funding to take care of the delta, remembering that there was contingencies added into some of these numbers as well. So as we work through the process, we're hoping to potentially tighten up some of the budget numbers here. So we're comfortable with the original request as it stands. Thank you.
Okay, Kim, to clarify, you're comfortable with the 216,000 being backed out and awarded in current funds.
However, the CPC wants to handle it, the 216 through current funds for this year for design, bid, and permitting, with the remainder as a bond, just again, try to reduce the debt service.
Okay.
That's up to you folks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Chuck Griffin? No, guess not. Chuck wants to say something, but he's going to do it in longhand, I guess. I'm sorry, Chuck, I can't read that.
He could use the chat, but he probably doesn't know how.
Chuck, if you do know how to use the chat, you can type us all a note.
Do we have a chat function though?
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't have that feature. It's generally
we
not
don't.
recommended.
Oh, you're
We got
right. You're right. This is a webinar. Yeah.
Yeah,
this
there
is
is the ability to call in though, the panelist invites and the city website both have phone numbers, I believe. So you
Right.
could call in if there's an issue there and perhaps use that.
Okay. Chuck, do try to use the call-in function if you care to.
You can call in by phone. Yeah.
Yeah, by phone, right. Any other questions or comments about the JAPA motion here from Mr. Rosen?
You mean the
Okay,
Bartlett motion?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, okay, here we go. Then it is if I can repeat, Mark, I'll repeat your motion, and that's to recommend funding in current funds for $216,000 for design and bid documents, and to recommend a 15-year bond in the amount of $2,574,000 for the Bartlett Mall project. We'll do a roll call here. Chuck, I need your sign again for yes or no. Chuck Griffin. Chuck says a yes.
Oh.
Paul Healy,
Yes.
Jane Healy,
Yes.
Don Little,
Yes.
Joe Morgan,
Yes.
Mark Rosen,
Yes.
Don Walters.
No,
Sorry, Don, what was that?
no,
That was a no from Don. Okay,
that was a no, correct.
okay, okay. The chair votes yes. Okay, so that motion passes. I guess the easiest way to proceed now would be to go down the list on the remaining applications for current funding. And I think I'll do it in order that they're listed. So the first one is priority housing needs and update to the housing production plan from the Affordable Housing Trust requesting $230,000. Is there a motion regarding this project?
I'll make a motion, Don Walters. Recommend approval.
I'll second.
Okay, and any discussion? Okay. No, Jane, are you, is your hand raised? No?
No.
Okay,
Just
then, no discussion needed. Then I'll do another roll call. Chuck Griffin, your sign, please. There it is with a yes. Paul Healy,
Yes.
Jane Healy,
Yes.
Don Little,
Yes.
Joe Morgan,
Yes.
Mark Rosen,
Yes.
Mark, yes. Don Walters,
Yes,
chair votes yes. Motion passes. Next item is the Old South Clock Face. at the Old South Church, request for $4,650. Is there a motion on this application?
I move to approve the Old South clock face for 4650.
Seconded. This is Joe.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, roll call. Chuck Griffin. Chuck votes yes. Paul Healy,
Yes,
Jane Healy,
Yes.
Don Little,
Yes,
Joe Morgan,
Yes.
Mark Rosen,
Yes,
Don Walters,
Yes.
chair votes yes. Motion passes. Next, project 3, Cushing House Architectural Preservation, Historical Society of Old Newbury, requesting $69,750. Is there a motion regarding this application?
This is Don Walters. I'll move to recommend approval.
Okay.
I'll
and the
second
full
it.
amount- Okay, it's moved and seconded to recommend this application in the full amount of $69,750. Is there any discussion?
yeah. What happens now if their new bid comes in significantly higher?
They'll be doing fundraising if they select that as the bidder, I guess.
right.
Yeah,
Either that
Or
or we'll
they'll
see
have to
them again
defer
next year. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Cut their
Okay.
project down. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Jane
all right.
Healy?
I had a similar question and related concern as Paul is that I wish that they had been able to get the American steeple estimate. I'm concerned that the current estimate isn't practical.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it would be hard to vote 0 just because I'm not sure that it's enough, but I'm not quite confident in the estimate and therefore the application.
Yeah, Mike, I wonder if we could put a condition on this one that when they get the other bids in, that we get to either we or the city council gets to review it to make sure that it's still feasible, or if they want to withdraw it and come back another time.
Don Little?
the applicant is in attendance if you want to ask.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is the applicant able to speak to us?
Can you hear me?
Susan, I can hear you now. Yes, thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
Did you hear the question?
I did hear the question. We have signed the contract and American Steeple and Tower are going to be doing the full assessment at the museum's cost. I did send an email to Caitlin this morning. Don Little had a question about that, clarifying the issue. If the bid came in lower, which personally I doubt that it will, all the extra funds that were not expended would revert to the CPC. If the estimate comes in higher, the museum has already committed to using some endowment income funds, but would also do additional fundraising for this first phase of the project to make sure that it's completed so that it wouldn't exceed our request of $69,750.
Okay,
Thank you, Susan.
Okay, good.
sounds good.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, then we'll do a roll call. Chuck Griffin? Chuck votes yes. Paul Healy?
Yes,
Jane Healy?
Yes.
Don Little?
That would be a yes.
Joe Morgan?
Yes.
Mark Rosen?
Yes,
Don Walters?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Motion passes. Next is number 5. Open Space Reserve Fund, requesting that $100,000 be put in the open space reserve. Is there a motion on this application?
I'll make a motion to allocate 100,000 to the Open Space Reserve Fund.
Is there a second?
This is
I'll
Jane.
second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, roll call. Chuck Griffin. Chuck votes yes. Paul Healy.
I
Yes.
might have to speak in a moment.
Jane Healy.
Yes.
Don Little.
Yes.
Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Mark Rosen.
No.
Don Walters.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Motion passes. Next application, Heritage Tree Preservation from Oak Hill Cemetery, requesting $10,000. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the heritage tree preservation request for $10,000.
Okay, is there a
Second.
second? Okay, any discussion? Roll call. Chuck Griffin. Chuck votes yes. Paul Healy.
Yes.
Jane Healy.
Yes.
Don Little.
Enthusiastic, yes.
Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Mark Rosen.
Yes.
Don Walters.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Motion passes. Next, we have the Joppa Park Improvement Project with a reduced request for $15,000, which represents the contingency amount over and above funding, the $100,000 funding that they've received elsewhere. Is there a motion on this project?
I'll move to approve the $15,000 request from Joppa Park Improvement Project.
Second,
Seconded, Joe.
discussion. Okay, roll call. Chuck Griffin. Chuck votes yes. Paul Healy.
Yes.
Jane Healy.
No.
Don Little.
Yes.
Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Mark Rosen.
Yes.
Don Walters.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Motion passes. Next, Lower Atkinson Common Improvement Project. I can't read my writing here. It looks like the application is in the amount of $523,000. Is that correct?
25,
525.
525.
I'm sorry, $525,000. Is there a motion on this project?
I'll move to approve the 525,000 request for the Lower Atkinson Common Improvement Project.
Okay. And as I understand the amended request, that is for the relocation and building of the playground only.
Right.
Okay,
You need a
sorry.
second, I'll second it, it's Don Walters.
okay. Any discussion?
This is Jane. I support this project at 525, but there's also that other issue of safety and the parking lot and the sidewalks. And I know from Mayor Reardon's letter that there is a intention of the city to find that funding for addressing those safety concerns with the parking lot and the sidewalk. I'm wondering what folks might think of tying our approval of the 525 or whatever we decide to secure the city securing funding for addressing the safety issues with the parking lot and the sidewalk, so that we know that that huge safety concern along Merrimack Street will be addressed sooner than later.
Don Walters?
Yeah, I'd like to keep them separate, and I appreciate if the playground is improved, there will be more younger age children there, which of course would be terrible if an accident happened. On the other hand, I'd like to think that if that's going to be used more, that it will precipitate action by the city to secure those other funds. If this is not approved or we tie it and they may not be as motivated to get funds, in my opinion. So for this reason, as well as this is what I believe is the official request in front of us, and not that we can't tie the two together, as you mentioned, Jane, I'd consider voting for this separately. Thank you.
Jane, would you like to offer an amendment to the motion to include the condition?
Sure, I can try that. I move to amend what am I amending though?
You're amending the motion to recommend the 525 without condition.
So I put forth a motion to recommend amending the first motion for 525 to put a condition that the city secure funding for the safety, to address the safety concerns with the parking lot and the sidewalk.
Okay, is there a second to that motion to amend?
I'll second.
Okay, is there discussion on the motion to amend?
Yeah. I think it's self-defeating to put that amendment on the motion, because if we don't give them the 525, they won't be able to do anything. So I think it's a self-defeating amendment. And I don't think it's appropriate to put that kind of condition on this kind of request.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, well, I would say that the initial request was for the playground and everything else. And this was kind of a compromise worked out, with the Parks Department, the mayor's office, everybody else, that if we approved the playground, that they would find the money or the resources to do the rest of the work. So, I understand that, you don't like to be in the position of trying to tie people's hands, but it'd be nice to get this project done, not just the playground.
And the mayor clearly says if without those funds, they can't move forward and take care of the parking and the sidewalks and all the other stuff. So.
Right, I guess my amendment is really just trying to send a message of the importance of the safety in this issue to the city council, who would eventually be the ones that would be approving funding for the parking lot and the sidewalks.
Well, the only way to really do that, in my opinion, is to go to the city council meeting and, speak in support of, further funding. But again, you're making a condition that if they can't find the funding, we're not going to move the playground, and you're willing to do that.
Any other discussion on the motion to amend? Okay, then we'll do, this is a roll call vote on the motion to amend the approval of the 525 with the condition that the 525 doesn't get released until the city is prepared with funding to do the rest of the project. That is the parking and the safety issues. Okay, roll call vote. Chuck Griffin on the motion to amend. Chuck votes yes. Paul Healy,
Yes.
Jane Healy,
Yes.
Don Little,
No.
Joe Morgan,
No.
Mark Rosen,
No.
Don Walters,
No.
chair votes no. Motion to amend fails. Any further discussion on the motion itself as originally presented? A roll call vote on the original motion. Chuck Griffin votes yes. Paul Healy,
Yes.
Jane Healy,
Yes.
Don Little,
Yes.
Joe Morgan,
Yes.
Mark Rosen,
Yes.
Don Walters,
Yes.
chair votes yes, motion passes. Okay. Next we have, next and last, we have Newburyport Black History Initiative requesting $53,000. Is there a motion on this application?
I'll
I
make a
move to
motion.
approve. Go ahead, Paul. Go ahead.
Second.
Okay, we've got Mark Rosen moving to approve, Paul Healy seconding, and it's a motion to approve $53,000 for the Newburyport Black History Initiative. Is there any discussion? Okay, roll call. Chuck Griffin. Chuck, we need your sign one more time. Chuck votes yes. Paul Healy,
Yes.
Jane Healy,
Yes.
Don Little,
Yes.
Joe Morgan,
Yes.
Mark Rosen,
Yes.
Don Walters.
Yes.
Chair votes yes, motion passes.
Okay. Hooray.
Nice job, folks.
Yeah.
Good year. Good year.
Yeah, and I do believe that we have, roughly 92,000 left in the till if my back of my envelope is right here.
It's about right. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So moving on with the agenda, and I think we can get this all done before I turn into a pumpkin at 9 o'clock.
I had a question.
Yeah.
Do we have to make a formal recommendation for the administrative expenses?
Yes, thank you, Don. I always forget about. Let me do this motion. I move that we recommend the payment of the current debt obligations, as well as $12,000 toward our administrative expenses.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? One more roll call. Chuck Griffin. Chuck, I'm sorry, I said you only needed your sign one more time. Thank you. Chuck votes yes. Paul Healy,
Yes.
Jane Healy,
Yes.
Don Little,
Yes.
Joe Morgan,
Yes.
Mark Rosen,
Yes.
Don Walters.
Yes.
The chair votes yes. The staff report. Excuse me a minute, I got to shut this phone off. Thank you. We, I guess, hadn't ever formally revised our policy, the committee's policy, that the typical and usual completion date of any project had been 1 year before they had to ask for extensions. And that being considered quite aggressive and maybe unreasonable, that we change the policy to 2 years, which I know we talked about last year. So in that regard, I would like to build into our standard conditions that the expected completion date of any project be 24 months. The 24 months commences with the signing of the grant agreement with the mayor's office and with the applicant, and that that condition be uniform unless otherwise stated in the recommendation. Anyway, I will move to change our policy to that effect. Is there a
I'll
second?
second it.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, boy, Chuck, I'm bringing our sign around again here. Chuck Griffin.
It's a vote, Chuck. Yay.
Yay, Chuck votes yes. Paul Haley.
Yes.
Jane Healy.
Yes.
Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Don Little.
Yes.
Mark Rosen.
Yes.
Don Walters.
Yes.
Mike Doucette votes yes. Okay, his motion, he better vote yes. There are extension requests for 8 outstanding projects. We've had the rationale for the extension requests. Some of these are additional requests. They've been extended prior. I would like to take this as a group and extend each one in the group for 12 months. And I will make a motion to that effect. Is there a second?
Second.
I second it.
Any discussion? Just a footnote is that Caitlin points out that the current grant agreements whereas they used to be between the committee and the applicant are now with the administration and the applicant. So in order to adjust any of these that are under grant agreements with the administration, it would be ultimately the mayor signing on to that agreement to extend with our recommendation and consent that extension be granted.
Oh.
So that's just as a footnote and as a procedure, the way this would be handled. Any discussion? Okay, roll call. Chuck Griffin. Yes. Paul Healy.
Yes.
Jane Healy.
Yes.
Don Little.
Yes.
Joe Morgan.
Yes.
Mark Rosen.
Yes.
Don Walters.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Motion passes.
I have a related comment on this.
Certainly.
Without hopefully getting it too complicated. There were 2 of these requests, this extension request, Joppa Park and the Swan Fountain were asking that remaining funds be carried forward into their current applications. I didn't know if that'd have to be a separate vote. You know, you don't have them right in front of
Yeah,
you, but
I am remembering that now. Which those were Joppa?
And the Swan.
read it. Yeah, Joppa Park was $67. No, Swan Fountain was $67.50, and Joppa Park, I don't know the amount, but again, request to move to the current application.
Okay. I'll I'll move to approve those two requests as well. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Mike, Andy has his hand up.
Andy, your hand is up.
Yes, sorry, it doesn't have to be taken right this moment. It was actually in relation to your CPC report, given the discussion you just had. I wasn't sure whether for Market Landing Park, there was also whether your report might include a recommendation to carry over the 250,000 that was appropriated last year, but was subject to a 1-year circle back with the council. I just wasn't sure whether you wanted to consider that in the same context as what you're discussing now.
Have we received a request for the extension on that?
I had included it in the memo regarding funding for this year, noting the fact that if that wasn't included in the CPC's report, the council might, not know what to do with that in the same cycle.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you, Andy. I'll bring that up right after we do the Swan Fountain and the JAPA carry forward dollars into their, let it slide into their current funding and current scope. Do we have a motion and a second on that?
Don Walters, I'll make the motion.
Okay, and I'll second it. Any discussion? Okay, this has to do with what I just said for JAPA and Swan Fountain. Chuck Griffin. Chuck says yes. Paul Healy,
Yes.
Jane Healy,
Yes.
Don Little,
Yes.
Joe Morgan,
Yes.
Mark Rosen,
Yeah.
Don Walters,
Yes.
chair votes yes, motion passes. I think with reference to the information Andy and the planning office previously submitted on the Market Landing Park application indicating they'd like to extend into and use in the with the current application funds the $250,000 that was recommended last year. And I would like to move to grant that request, that it be used in that way. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, roll call. Chuck Griffin. Chuck votes yes. Paul Healy,
Yes.
Jane Healy,
Yes.
Don Little,
Yes.
Joe Morgan,
Yes.
Mark Rosen,
Yeah.
Don Walters.
Yes.
Chair votes yes, motion passes. Okay. All right. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from April 7?
Chair, can I make a quick footnote?
You may.
This is Joe. If you'll allow me just to read a short paragraph here from the coalition website regarding the historic properties. And I don't know if there's any action item required, but I just like to maybe have the record show it. The important thing for CPCs to remember is this: CPA grant awards for rehabilitation work on historic resources should clearly stipulate use of these standards, referring to the Secretary of the Interior's standards for the treatment of historic properties as a requirement of receiving the grant. This is true whether the work is being done on municipally owned assets, such as a town building, or if the grant is being given to a non-municipal organization. If everything is set out clearly in advance in the grant award, then there is less chance of something going wrong later when the project is underway. I don't know if this is just boilerplate in some sort of a grant notification to the applicants or what, but I just thought I'd bring it up because I don't know.
It's a
Hi,
it's
Joe,
a
it
little
is
bit of,
Caitlin,
Go ahead.
that language is in the grants.
that's what I thought. It's boots and suspenders. It's not only in the grant, but it's also in any place where there's a preservation restriction. It's in the restriction as well.
Very good. Thank you very much for the
Okay.
clarification.
Okay.
Come on, Lou.
Good.
Hey, come on, medicine. Come on.
Is a motion to approve I'll move to approve the minutes of 4/7. I believe there were a couple of corrections that were submitted to Rachel in advance of the meeting. Is that correct, Rachel?
That's correct. I did make those
Okay.
corrections. I know I sent them just before the meeting, so you may not have seen them.
Okay, so, well, I move to approve the minutes as corrected. Is there a second?
I second it.
Okay. Rather than doing I'm going to try this. Let's have a voice vote with Chuck's sign. Okay, Chuck, you hold up your sign. We're all going to voice. All those in favor?
I,
Aye.
I hear that as a unanimous approval of the
all
minutes.
right.
Okay. Is there, I'm looking forward to a face-to-face meeting again, where we can raise our hands. Jeez.
Oh, boy.
Thank you very much. I know this is a tough one. And I think we once again rose to the occasion and achieved a consensus relatively smoothly. And thank you for that.
You want a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, I'm happy to have that if nobody has any other business or comments.
All in favor?
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye, aye, aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, Chair.
Night, night.
And everyone, thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks.